Air pollution is a huge health issue.
A luta contra o aquecimento global é uma das prioridades
for reducing emissions.
Thick smoke billowed above Brazil's Amazon jungle
is on top of the impacts of
as a
climate
vital
change.
defense against climate change.
Pollution from burning fossil fuels.
Bom dia, muito
Good
bom dia. Sejam
morning.
todos muito bem-vindos
Welcome
e bem-vindas ao nosso
everyone
Sustainable
to
Talks
Sustainable
2021. Eu
Talks
sou
2021. I'm Patricia Scioli, responsible for the communication area at Scania, Latin America, and it will be a pleasure to be with you throughout this week.
Durante os próximos 4
In the
dias,
next 4 days, we will bring together business leaders, representatives of institutions and public authorities to debate essential strategies and actions to contain global warming.
hoje, aqui na nossa abertura,
In this
ela
opening,
acontece
this opening is happening in a hybrid format with some guests in person here and others following online. From December 1st to 3rd, we'll meet digitally. That's the deal. You that are used to follow us, please do not forget, from 1st to 3rd, we'll have more sustainable talks. We need to highlight we are following all the health protocols to make a safe event and fruitful for you all following at home and here. We are live at Scania Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico's YouTube channels. Yes, we are talking many languages, and we count on the participation of Scania throughout Latin America and international guests, and we have simultaneous translation in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. Please, you can choose the language you need. We'll start in Portuguese and then we'll speak English. What is vital for this conversation is your interaction. No matter where you are, please participate with us. Submit your questions and comments via YouTube chat. For those who will be here with us in person today, send comments and questions through WhatsApp chat. We'll talk through this way. Please put your name and institution so we know who we are talking to. And to get into the mood of sustainable talks, a serious matter. But we talk smoothly about these things. We want to start with a poll. It's a tradition in our events, right? We'll bring to you the poll, and I would like to know from everyone, please answer who has your cell phone here and who is online, any other place. Please do not forget to answer. We want to know what sustainability agenda should be prioritized. We know climate change, diversity and inclusion, biodiversity, corporate governance, and social impact and human rights. To participate, point your cell phone to the QR code on screen or enter the link available on YouTube in our chat. Soon we'll come back to check the results. And I'm really curious. Let's go. Let's start Sustainable Talks from today. We left 2020 behind, and there was a doubt on how would be the new normal. And from the learnings we had with the pandemic, we would be able to build a more sustainable, resilient, and fair world. We entered 2021 with the concept of ESG, the acronym for Environmental, Social, and Governance, gaining ground on the agendas of business, media, leaders, and society. We still need to see if this will be a legitimate and long-term move. But there's no question that as the climate shifts from a peripheral issue to be a predominant concern in meeting rooms around the world, there's the immense opportunity of making real changes. And now, on the eve of 2022, we still have the echo of the discussions of COP26 on climate change in our minds, we need to understand how decisions made in Glasgow in COP26 will help us to reach the goals of Paris Agreement. And to contribute with these insights, we will bring to this space questions, none of them easy to answer, but all substantial. I would like to start asking if what does climate change affect your life, ours, deep inside. Climate change, it affects everything from geopolitics to economics, passing through migration. It designs cities, life and consumption expectation. It affects everyone, but differently, increasing each time more vulnerability of the ones with less resources. This is something we have to have in mind. The commitment we have with the government requires from nations and companies to be net zero up to 2050, and set the emission and reductions of carbon to be neutral. This is a problem that needs a systemic look. That's the importance of talking about ecosystem and approaching the central theme of this meeting today, the partnerships. In this context, we start a new conversation in sustainable talks. The event organized annually since 2019. This year, we will approach the role of leadership before what is the biggest challenge faced by humanity, and the decision-making able to leverage the transition and determining our future. After all, are we doing everything we can in this decade of climate action? Are we decarbonizing, making the actions we need? With this provocation, I have the pleasure to call President CEO from Scania, Christopher Podgorski, to welcome you all. Christopher, please.
Bom dia, Patrícia.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Patricia. First of all, thank you for the presence of those who are here with us and our guests who watch us online. It's undoubtedly a joy to gather allies around a topic that needs to accelerate, gain scale, and we need to win this race against time. I think I've already started to answer your question, Patricia. I believe we can and must go further. In case of our ecosystem, for example, technologies to decarbonize commercial road transport are within our reach. We began our journey of redefining our role as an agent of transformation in our industry in 2016. At that time, little was said or understood or facing the need to decarbonize a sector that is responsible for 14% of greenhouse gas emissions. But in recent years, we established dialogues with many actors in our ecosystem, leading the change towards the adoption of more sustainable transport and logistics. It became our brand purpose and our tool for action, integrated to our strategy. We understand we are part of the problem, environmental problem, and we already know we are part of the solution. With total responsibility, we will help to build from now on the future we want for the next generations. And this is not a simple path. There are many barriers that we need to overcome. Lack of infrastructure, alignment of demand and supply, regulatory challenges, and issues related to costs and financing solutions. Small examples. But I won't go any further with this topic right now because we want, in fact, to hear from our guests.
Desejo a
I only
todos
wish you an
excelente
excellent
e produtivo
event
evento, para todos
for
vocês,
all
e
of
que
you,
possamos
and
ter uma
that we
semana
can
toda de
have a week
discussões
of
ricas
rich and
e
purposeful
propositivas
discussions
para futuro
for a
mais
more
sustentável.
sustainable future.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you.
Obrigada a você, Christopher. Acho que já deu para aguçar aí as
I think you
ideias,
are
os
starting to
comentários, as
have more
perguntas.
ideas,
E o recado tá
comments, or
claro.
questions,
Enquanto
and the
2050
message is
não
clear
chega,
why
vamos nos
2050 doesn't
guiando pelo
arrive. Let's be guided by the present.
Certo? Agora, será que a gente
But
consegue conferir
can we
o
check
resultado da
the
pesquisa,
result
da
of
enquete?
the poll?
Poxa, para você, qual o tema de
What is
sustentabilidade
the
deveria ser
sustainability
prioridade?
agenda
Mudança
should be a
climática,
priority in our
impacto
country?
social.
Climate change and
Interessante, lembrando
social
que a gente tem
impact.
gente de outros
Remember,
países
we have
participando,
people
às
from
vezes a
other
prioridade é
countries.
diferente.
Sometimes
Então, nem
priority
tudo é
is different.
importante,
What
certo?
matters is
Muito
everything
obrigada
is
quem
important.
participou e
Thank you very
vai vir
much,
mais
and
por
we'll
aí.
have
Fiquem
more.
prontos, tá bom?
Be ready.
Agora é momento de virar a
Now,
chave. Eu vou
it's
trocar
time
pro
to turn the
inglês,
key to
trocar
English
pro meu broken English e para receber
to
nossa
receive
primeira
our first
convidada de
guest.
hoje. Ok? Então vamos lá.
Let's go.
No matter where you look on the sustainability agenda, the ongoing debate about shareholders and stakeholders, new economy, new capitalism, the power of influence of corporation has grown. So the public interest in the role in society. How to respond to it? How to transform business in a way that sustainability is a conviction? To help us answer this question, we will welcome an American and today a Swedish citizen direct from Stockholm, Elaine Grenvald. She has more than 2 decades of international execute experience with focus on sustainability, ESG, digitalization, public affairs, and corporate development. She is also co-author, together with Scania's former CEO, Henrik Henriksson, of the book, Sustainability Leadership, a Swedish approach to transforming your company, your industry, and the world. But why to talk about the Swedish way to boost sustainability? Anyone here have a clue? Well, Sweden is #1 in many, many global sustainability rankings. That's one of the reasons. But to talk about that, we will welcome Elaine. Elaine, can you hear us? Are you with us? Oh, wow, she is really in our sustainable talks. Good morning. Wait a minute. We cannot hear you from here. Do you have the... Can you hear us? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, now perfect. Welcome to our event, Elaine. That's a pleasure from our side. Can I start with a difficult question for you? What is the secret of the Swedish for the sustainability journey and success?
Great. So, well, you talked about Sweden ranking high on many rankings, and that, of course, is true whether you look at innovation, competitiveness, or sustainability. But I would say, having lived, both in the United States as well as Sweden for many years, Swedes are very unique. They manage to balance, equality, humility, but with a strong global mindset. And they have they prize nature almost like a religion. So there's a great appreciation for nature and the outdoors.
Ellos aprecian la naturaleza y estar al aire libre. Así que también tenemos una democracia, que es muy estable, lo que favorece a la cultura, combinado a tal vez si ustedes están en los negocios o en la academia, todo esto obviamente prioriza la sostenibilidad. Así que, bueno, hay muchos casos exitosos como de Scania, Electrolux, y donde hay este país pequeño que depende de la exportación.
Okie dokie, but we want to know more. In your book, you offer a simple but a powerful three-step model for
Nosotros
leadership.
queremos
and we
saber
have
más. Entonces,
around
en su
40
libro usted
present
ofrece
present in our event, many leaders. We'd like to know what is this model, sustainability model, 3 steps for the sustainability model. Can you give us a little bit more on that?
Sure. So the whole premise of the book was not so much why is sustainability important, because we
del por
felt
qué
that,
la sostenibilidad
most
es
people
importante.
are starting to realize that today, that sustainability needs to be higher up on the agenda. Instead, we wanted to focus on how. So not the why, but the how. So if you're that person in a company and you're
Importante.
looking
Entonces,
for a
cuando
roadmap
estamos en
or
una
guide
empresa
on
y
how you could
necesitamos un
increase your
plan, una
sustainability
guía, o
ambition,
cómo
well, that
podemos
was really the
aumentar
basic idea of the book. Henrik and I say it's like a roadmap that we wish someone gave to us 15 years ago. And so to create that roadmap to help guide others, we created this model. And that's the 3-step model that we think can help a business leader start to, transform their journey to get at bigger world-changing goals. So the 3 steps of the model, we say the first part is the foundation, and this is about understanding and knowing your own footprint as a company and being able to build trust through responsible business practices. It's really about putting a stake in the ground and setting the rules. So what are the do's and the don'ts for behavior? What policies does the company have? But it's also about setting a clear purpose. And I think, Scania has one of the best purpose statements I've seen, which is driving the shift. And so the foundation is really about doing your homework and knowing what you're doing. So that's the first phase of the model. The second part is what we call the core. So the core is when you start to embed sustainability into your core business. So you start to link sustainability to sales, to customer value creation. And what we say in the book is there's no sustainability strategy, there's only a business strategy. And that is or is not sustainable. So that's the core. And then the third part of the model is where everybody wants to get to in the book. It's called the leap. And this is really, this section of the book is about you can't solve exponential problems like climate change, for example, with incremental solutions. So this is about daring to go for stretch targets. It's about leadership. It's about using your own platform as a leader to drive the change. And I think often leaders underestimate their own influence in an organization. If you have a CEO or the senior management of a company, setting this high on the agenda, you have a much greater momentum in the company than if you are working bottom up. So we say that leadership starts at the top. So those are the 3 parts of the model: the foundation, the core, and the leap.
Okay, so we have to do our homework, embedded sustainability, create value for our customer, business strategy convicted with sustainability, and then we have the great leap. Thank you so much for that quick explanation. But we just had a survey here asking our audience what were the priorities when it comes to climate change sustainability. And they mentioned climate change and social impact. And I'm curious to understand from your point of view, is it possible to have the planetary lens and the social lens together? Is it possible for a company to be a for profit and still care for social impact?
Yeah, I think there's been quite a lot of change now in the way, that companies are starting to think about value. I mean, for decades, we've been talking about shareholder value being, the prime metric for any company. And I think that that is starting to change. On the one hand, we have problems like climate change that you said the audience has put high on the agenda. This is an existential threat. So it's not something you can fix by changing the part of a vehicle or something like that. I mean, it's a huge issue where we need business and society and all parts of society working together. And I remember a couple of years ago when this business roundtable, you might have heard of them, they came out with, BlackRock, and all the big investors came out and something like 200 CEOs, and they signed this declaration acknowledging that it's not only shareholders that need to be taken into account, but all stakeholders. And when Henrik and I were writing the book, we thought, well, that's kind of a good start to start to move some of these major companies, but that's not enough. I mean, just acknowledging society is not enough. And so what we tried to do in the book and say, look, this isn't about how society perceives your
Isso
brand.
não é somente sobre como a sociedade percebe a sua marca.
Outside in worrying about
Isso não é somente só sobre se preocupar com como as pessoas percebem a marca. É muito mais que isso. Isso é sobre qual é o impacto da sua empresa na sociedade. Você vê que nós mudamos o foco. Não é sobre como a sociedade vê você, mas é sobre o impacto que você tem na sociedade. Então, isso que está no centro do nosso modelo. Então, quando falamos sobre a questão da lente societal, ela está baseada na questão de respeito pelos direitos humanos. E eu acho que as empresas têm uma obrigação de respeitar os direitos do indivíduo. Então, acredito que tem um significado muito mais profundo. Não é somente sobre os acionistas, sobre o valor dos acionistas. Então, a lente planetária, como falamos, é sobre entender o impacto da sua empresa no meio ambiente e no planeta. Isso é um pouco mais fácil, eu acho, que as pessoas entendam. Isso está em pauta há mais tempo. Mas acredito que os negócios são parte da sociedade, são parte da questão ambiental também. Obrigada por isso. Então, desde que você mencionou o impacto, no seu livro, você também menciona diferentes questões sobre insumos e impactos. Você pode compartilhar essas diferenças conosco hoje? Sim, eu diria que as principais diferenças são do impacto, não é somente a questão do retorno financeiro. As métricas financeiras e também em questão, quando você olha sobre rentabilidade, aumento de receita, podemos e também olhar sobre a questão de desempenho do negócio. Não é somente sobre isso que podemos falar. Essas coisas não são somente importantes. Claro, você tem que ter um lucro para sua empresa, mas também estamos falando que isso é sobre a questão de retorno da sociedade. As empresas, elas não existem num vácuo. Os líderes, os que nós achamos que vão ser bem-sucedidos, eles precisam cada vez mais ter um papel e olhar por essas lentes da sociedade que eu estou falando. Ok. Estamos aumentando o nível aqui para os nossos CEOs. Agora temos uma pergunta da nossa audiência, João Moreira, de Scania.
E nos pergunta, por que Scania?
Como a Suécia se tornou protagonista nas questões métricas ambientais?
Well, Patricia,
Patrícia, não estou conseguindo ouvir muito. Eu acho que eu entendi a pergunta, como que a Suécia se tornou proativa.
Se volvió proactiva en temas ambientales, ¿no? Bueno, esto
Vem de muitas décadas, desde os anos 70, a
Suecia fue uno de los primeros países que tuvo una conferencia sobre el desarrollo sostenible. Suecia es un país pequeño y tiene un gran sentido de responsabilidad. No solo
dos seus cidadãos, mas também do ambiente. E isso é muito profundo na nossa sociedade. Eu mudei para a Suécia há 20 anos atrás e eu lembrei que eu vim dos Estados Unidos e naquela época as questões ambientais não eram muito bem desenvolvidas.
Talvez desde o ponto de vista normal, ¿no? Pero no era más que eso. Sigo entusiasmada, me llama mucho la atención sobre el medio ambiente, cómo el medio ambiente es una prioridad en nuestra agenda. Tenemos todo eso sobre Ericsson, los CEOs, todos los gerentes, todos están muy preocupados con este tema. Eso es algo cultural, de reflexión de la organización. Ellos son un países pequeños y piensan cómo van a tener la supervivencia, cómo van a ser independientes de outras nações. Todo isso está integrado em nossa sociedade.
Você também falou quais são os dilemas que você viu aos membros quando você traz a sustentabilidade para a agenda para as questões de conselhos de administração. Quais são os dilemas que você vê? Eu estou em vários conselhos, eu estou em 3 conselhos diferentes agora, e uma coisa que eu gosto de começar é que tem um estudo de uma organização chamada Ceres, nos Estados Unidos, que descobriu que quase 500 companhias, de 500 companhias, quase 17% delas sustentabilidade nos seus conselhos. Então, eu diria que o dilema é que a maioria dos conselhos estão totalmente despreparadas para essas questões. Eu acho que isso está mudando, mas os tópicos que os conselhos estão enfrentando, eles têm que pensar, eu estou no conselho e eu tenho que mudar a questão da sustentabilidade no conselho, nessa companhia. Então, como poderemos fazer isso? Como podemos incluir como estratégia? Como que o conselho pode trabalhar com a sustentabilidade? Como podemos fazer com que isso seja uma responsabilidade da companhia? Quais as competências que o conselho precisa ter para fazer isso? Então, precisamos olhar a questão em relação a riscos. Então, esses são alguns dos assuntos. Temos sustentabilidade na agenda.
COP26. What are your takeaways from this event, this conference, Elaine?
Well, the first COP that I went to was it was COP15 in 2009 in Denmark. So I've followed this conference of the parties for many years, and for me, I think that what's happening now in the COP is you're seeing a greater engagement of business and a greater sense of urgency, and I think this is great because we're at a time when the private sector has more power and influence than ever before. We have trillion-dollar companies, an enormous amount of wealth being generated, but also I think business leaders today need to understand things like the Paris Agreement and how the COPs are, taking issues like climate change and trying to get a global agreement together. So I would say for me, one of the key takeaways is that we're seeing more engagement of the private sector. did the COP26 go far enough? I don't think so. I think, now we have another year. We see a lot of warning signs going in the wrong direction with everything from rising temperatures to the effects of that.
Os efeitos disso, mas eu acho que foi interessante
the transport sector a bit
entrando no setor de transporte, agora há muito envolvimento ativo em torno das emissões net zero, de carbono zero, muito relacionado à eletrificação, transporte, dependendo da fonte que usa, emissões diminuem 20% as emissões. É isso que estamos falando nesse evento. No Brasil, algo como 80% do transporte é rodoviário, é uma grande oportunidade em eletrificação do transporte e usando a COP para esse tipo de evento, para aumentar a conscientização sobre as soluções, porque no fim, é isso que precisamos fazer. Precisamos começar a juntar as ferramentas e os recursos dos negócios para
scalable solutions, because it's not enough to just point at the problem. We have to figure out how are we getting out of these problems.
Well, we are towards the end of this talk, but we have been getting many questions here from our audience. I will just ask one more, Elaine, but we have many here. I will decide here upon how does Sweden drive climate change adaptation and mitigation in the countries from which it imports all the food it consumes? It's from our colleague Velma Gregorio.
So I think climate adaptation and mitigation is two very, very big topics. And I don't know if you look at that from a government point of view, or again, coming back, what I always look for is the solution agenda. I'm on the board of a Swedish company called Sweco, and they are designing sustainable communities of the future. And a lot of that is looking at sustainable architecture and infrastructure, and looking how, with something like 100 cities, mega cities in the world facing rising sea levels, how do you actually retrofit a city? What could you do in Amsterdam? What can you do in parts of the world where water is very prevalent in the cities? And so there's quite a bit of architectural and engineering work going on to think through that. And that's coming from just one example. I mean, there are many, many examples, but this is a Swedish company starting to export solutions for climate adaptation and mitigation.
Okay, we are receiving many questions here also regarding Brazil, how to relate that. But we'll get one here from our colleague Maria Isabel. Elaine, what's the importance of corporate governance for sustainability? That's a good one.
Well, corporate governance is really the starting point, and that's what I meant about the first part of our model in the book about the foundation. Sometimes you get companies that want to see sustainability just from a PR or communications point of view. They want to go out and tell all their fabulous stories. And that's part of getting to the leap. But if you don't start with doing your own homework and getting the right corporate governance in place for environment, as well as societal issues, there is a very high risk that you will fail, because if you don't set the foundation right, once you build your house, it can crumble. So in order to be credible and trustworthy and a responsible business, I know Global Compact is part of this event as well. When in my time at Ericsson, we built our codes of conduct, code of business ethics on Global Compact 10 principles. And so things like that, making sure that it's not just part of your policies, but actually part of the way that you work and the behavior that you reflect, is probably, really the most important starting point in creating a culture of awareness around the importance of these type of governance issues.
Okie dokie. Thank you very much, Elaine. I will have to stop here with one more last question that I'm curious to know what's the next steps on your journey. And thank to all of you that have sent questions. I will forward to you, Elaine, and if you have time with the contact, we can answer our colleagues, okay? So
absolutely, I'd be happy to do that. And well, for me, I spent 20 years at Ericsson. Then I wrote the book. I founded a company. I've done a few different things. Right now, I've started to explore sustainable investing quite a bit. And I'm actually involved in the acquisition of a EV charging company. And I was just reading on Twitter today, I saw that Bloomberg said that EVs are now 10% of all car sales. So we're really starting to see this fantastic, exponential growth, but the infrastructure isn't there. So I'm working with a company called ADS Tech Energy, which is making EV charging infrastructure, but with a battery buffered system. So you don't, if that exponential growth of electric vehicles are all plugging into the power grid, we're going to get blackouts and brownouts, and we're going to crash out the grids. So what ADS Tech Energy did was create a battery buffered solution where you can draw, 20 to 50 kilowatts from the grid, you store it in a battery buffer, and then you can ultra fast charge the car up to 320 kilowatts. So it's about charging in minutes, not hours, and it's about not impacting the grid. And I think that's a really exciting innovation and solution. And if we're going to scale up this EVs for the net zero emissions, it's not just the cars, it's the whole infrastructure around it. And I know that's something that companies like Scania and many others understand, because in order to drive the shift, you have to have the whole solution there. So anyway, I hope we can see many more innovations like that coming out and really see how the business community can play an either bigger role. So the one last thing, because I told you, Patricia, I was going to do this, is just challenge you a bit. A lot of companies, when they set sustainability targets, there's a lot of like, by 2050 will be carbon neutral. And what I usually push back a bit on and say, who in your management team is going to be accountable in 2050 for those targets? So I think we have to ask ourselves, are we really doing enough? If climate change is so urgent and we have a planetary emergency, how can we get targets within the lifetime of our roles in business, whether that's 2, 3, 5 years, and then work incrementally up to 2050? So just something to leave you with, provoke you a bit, but that's it from me, Patricia. Thank you for having me.
Well, challenge taken by our CEOs here for the next time that we have here together during Sustainable Talks. Thank you so much. It was quick, but it was great to listen to you. Thank you, Elaine. And then we switch for Portuguese.
Enjoy your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Muito bom, muito bom. Uma bela inspiração para a gente aquecer aqui já a conversa, a roda de conversa que a gente vai ter agora. Mas, para me ajudar... Juliana.
Bom dia, pessoal. Bom dia a todos. Bom dia, Patrícia.
Incrível ter a nossa Elaine aqui com a gente, né?
Incrível mesmo, né? A gente saiu aqui mais inspirado ainda para seguir com as nossas conversas durante essa manhã. Então agora...
Now it's time to call the second guest of the day, Patricia. It's a privilege talking about leadership and sustainability. I'm loving the energy you were bringing up here. It's so good to have everyone present here with all the cares, but it's good to be here with you. That's the time to talk about the next theme. In the wake of COP26, leaders and nations can expect more regulations, more demands for climate-related financial information and a closer scrutiny of their investors, stakeholders. Were the decisions enough for reaching our goals? This is the theme of our next question. You are following us, will answer. So, having your cell phone in hands to participate, let's go. We want to know who was following COP26. There were a lot of reflections. We selected the main ones. We wanted to know from you. What was the best news about COP26? Elimination of deforestation by 2030, 30% reduction in methane. We'll talk a lot about this on Thursday, about this theme. Elimination of coal by 2030 for developed countries. This 100 trillion fund from financial institutions for net zero goals, or the conclusion of Article 6 rule book on the carbon market, a global demand to regularize such important markets to reach our net zero goals. You know, to participate, direct your cell phone to the QR code and answer to us. Soon we'll check the result. Very well, and to talk about the main impressions of COP26, we call now Executive Secretary of Global Impact in Brazil, Carlo Pereira. He could not be here in presence, but a good thing is we learn how to work online, so everything is okay. Carlo, it's a pleasure having you here, even though virtually. Can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you well. It's very good having you here. Some people ask, where's Carlo? He will be digitally with us, but it's excellent having you here in our event. So let's go. COP was much awaited and commented upon. After 2020, without the conference and in the midst of a pandemic, the world was questioning how to have a recovery guided by a green economy, which would avoid the increase of in the Earth's temperature. I would like to know, you were there in Glasgow. What were the main achievements of COP26? Thank you, Juliana. First, I would like to congratulate you all my friends who are there. I'm sad that I'm not there, and I had health issues and I could not go. I would like to see you all. Regarding the main achievements you brought up in your question, what we saw, talking about what was COP, it was a different one. We had immediately before COP, or months before, we had a series of events to pressure the stakeholders, the chiefs of state, so we could go there with a satisfactory result in the end. So we had from Biden in March, we have a series of announcements along the months, and in G20, a series of announcements as well. Bilateral, multilateral announcements of countries committing themselves with net zero, like China, telling to stop financing coal outside China, for example. And at COP, during COP, we had a series of mini agreements. It was different as well. In general, we reached the agreement in the COP in the end only. And in this one, we had a lot of mini agreements, as the one you told about, related to coal. It's important. Brazil is not in the 3 mini agreements we had. Regarding methane, Brazil is in there. Regarding deforestation as well. So it's really important to Brazil. We are really pressured regarding deforestation and regarding methane, because no doubt it's a rich theme for us, since the second biggest source of emission in Brazil is regarding methane from agricultural area and etherical penetration of cattle breeding. And also, to summarize, we had the rule book, Article 6. It's really important, no doubt. It brought a framework so we can close the carbon market, a regulated one globally, according to the Paris Agreement. I would like to talk about this later. Talking to many leaders, I see many times we think about a carbon market as something, an opportunity, unbelievable opportunity that will make all the balance sheet of all the company in Brazil to be brilliant. No, that's not the case. So we need to look carefully to this. Inside climate governance, we have many other things to observe and discuss.
Also, to sum it up, we have other important issues that the participation of the civil society movements, especially from young people, they're very strong. Indigenous people from many places in the world, they are very vocal and they're very clear about their objectives. This is also very important about COP26. And also, in this first moment, to conclude, I would like to say two things more in relation to a very active participation from the private sector. Oh, Carlos, but CEO has never been to COP. Yes, they have been. As our guest said, since COP from in Copenhagen, and of course throughout the other COPs that we have seen, like Paris, but not as we've seen in this one. And this is something important. We haven't seen many people talking about this, but in relation to executive, in relation to subnational leaders, for example, mayors, we also governors. We had 20. We had a very strong presence from the legislative power. For example, Rodrigo Pacheco, and also many senators and a lot of deputies, legislators that were present there. So we have to take this into account. And the last thing I wanted to mention is about climatism. I don't know if this is a topic here, but is to remove the focus from carbon, is to think about other things and have other things that are related to climate. For example, a transition, a fair transition, climate justice, environmental justice, other things like financing, losses and gains. So themes that are very in trend, but they are now starting to be addressed more deeply and more clearly. Thank you, Carlos. And I think this is very interesting for you to bring the compromising of Brazil in regards to two goals, especially to deforestation. 45% of our emissions come from deforestation, so it's very important to Brazil to be committed to that. And also thinking about methane, which is also a very big villain for our climate change. 28 times more pollutant than carbonic gas. So there is a solution for methane. This is good, and we're going to talk about that with our CEOs, right? So, but before, Carlos, I would like to hear from you. And on the other hand, what did they didn't discuss? What did you expect? And that wasn't discussed. I was expecting more. I was expecting, we leave this COP with a taste of victory. We did many contributions, of course, but I think that we would reach 2.7 at the end I don't think we could reach 2.8 that we came to about now. But COP26 isn't finished. especially in the private sector, we closed many deals, many agreements. For example, the alliance of the banks in relation to deforestation. We're talking about, at least in the financial sector, $9 trillion. This is very important after COP. And next COP, the countries, they have to bring their short-term goals. So as they said, we talk about long-term, but we have to show the plan behind that. So for the next COP, the countries will have to bring their short-term plans. So at the same time, in answering your question, it's of course, we could have reached something else, but I am happy. We're going to get there, of course. Another thing is related to financing. Particularly, I have this historical position of Brazil, but the principle of common responsibility, but it's a different one. So this is very reflected in the financing question. The financing was closed in Copenhagen in 2020 to have 100 million a year. We haven't reached that number. And the countries have said that up to 2050, they want to double this goal. And this has surprised me a lot because they are very conservative. And there was a lot of discussion about the financing, the climate financing. And the Ban Ki-moon, they talk about Ban Ki-moon was said that we need $800 billion to make this transition. And we know that we're not talking about hundreds of billions. We could talk about trillions. So we could reach that. So this has bitter taste, for me. They really ask for more. They really ask more for everybody, But when they talk about financing, then the story is different. Then the conversation is different. So I think this is something that was not enough for me. I think this is very good, Carlos. This is something good to mitigate the climate change. We have many examples as 130 trillions for the fund that we have received in Andrea Nicola from Itaú. And she has mentioned everything we are doing for this in regards to this. So, Carlos, you are head of Pacto Global for the private sector in Brazil. Tell me more about what the CEOs that went to COP and what do they expect? What are they doing? What are their plans to achieve these goals? They are doing a lot on one side. So a lot of people, they know that they have to do, but they know what they have to. They know what they have to do, but they know how to do it. We have many examples. For example, in relation to climate, we have about 20, 30 CEOs doing that. And what I talk with CEOs, and as we have said, as we have seen, in relation to companies, it's a plan to reach that neutrality. We have to show that, and the financial market is going to ask for that, and society is going to ask for that. We have 130 companies that are compromising for that, but when we talk about initiatives, science-based initiatives, we have 30 companies, which is very significant, but these 100 and something companies have to migrate, have to do this based on science. Today, I don't see another methodology that is accepted in the world as much as this methodology. So I think that the companies, because we know about the initiative that we represent in the Latin America in my office here in Brazil, we know that there are methodologies and the goal is approved by a foreign body. So we have all the confidence that the companies need. So this is very important. We have to observe this. Something we have to observe about the climate governance is that GHG protocol, it's also the most accepted protocol in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. We have almost 4% in Brazil. It's very little. It's very little. So when we talk about scope 3, to look at the chain, we could generalize that this is almost inevitable. So this is something basic. In relation to risk, to climate risk conversations, how the companies are treating the hybrid risk. How are they addressing the issue for hydric stress in terms of tornadoes? How is this being addressed? How are we addressing the risks and opportunities related to taxes from borders based in carbons, as Europe has approved already? So we have to discuss this. We have to internalize these discussions more. So this is what we have. A lot of compromise a lot of commitments to neutrality of carbon, but I see a lot of opportunities of risks that are connected to this agenda. Just to sum it up, when we talk about carbon market and we focus a lot on this discussion, again, this is not going to be the greatest solution in relation to generate significant income for companies. For example, just to give you some numbers. So I saw these days that the carbon market in Kyoto has viabilized 94% of companies in Brazil. This is not true. I see that, for example, a hydroelectric plant that was built and that had the carbon project. So this plant was viabilized for a carbon project. No, this is not true. Is this wrong to affirm? Yes, it wasn't. Nobody built a hydroelectric plant thinking about carbon. So this is something that we talk about, strong consideration for MDE, for carbon, for example. So we have to understand that this is not a solution. Some studies from CC that we have opportunities for carbon market for $500 million to 16 billion when they talk about 72B. But again, this is good, but we have other issues. The market, so we can have a transition for a low carbon economy, yes. This one it needs trillions and trillions of dollars, even in Brazil. But the carbon markets for sale to sell reduction of emissions of carbon, this is not going to be a panacea. We're going to have this very clear. This has to be very clear. I see many companies, to answer more directly your question, is to use new instruments, new financial tools, many times as linked bonds, climate bonds. For example, JBS last week has launched a security based in carbon that was sustainability bonds, and it was the low emission of securities of the company, the lowest related to carbon. So it has compromised to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So it's going to pay a premium because of them not reaching the goal. So 46% of the debts of companies, of securities for Brazilian companies issued in the other countries were related to these factors. So yes, we have a lot of opportunities. We have a financial flow that is very significant, but not just for carbon market. This is all very related to that. Yes, yes, Carlos. And we have to be more optimistic because we have a long journey ahead of us. We are very engaged, but the most important is what you said, to have plans and to see how we can change this climate change scenario. We would like to continue with you, but we have other guests. We thank you very much for your participation with us, your virtual participation. Thank you very much. And we're going to continue with our event. Oh, let me just say something else. I would just like to mention that the optimistic tone, I didn't bring a pessimistic one, but a realistic tone. But there are a lot of risks, so we have to read the whole scenario. Something else that I would like to say is when we talk about a transition for a low-carbon economy, remember that in 2050, the ideal is that we have zero emissions, that we have a neutral carbon economy. This was the goal for Brazil. So what do we have? What we have for opportunities in this agenda is in this period, yes. So we have to be first movers in this carbon agenda. Carbon, so we have to be clear that this is an opportunity that will turn into compliance. I would just like to finish my talk with this message. Excellent. There are many opportunities, and we're going to defend our planet because we don't have a planet B. Let's take care of our planet A. We would like to know about the poll. For you, what was the great news from COP26? Let's check. We had elimination of forest deforestation up to by 2030, first place. Second, elimination of coal. And last, third place, conclusion of the rule book, Article 6 on the carbon market. We thank you for your participation. Well, it's time to move to the final part of our event. The theme today was CEOs for Sustainability. This will be really important. We were inspired by what Elaine said and Carlo now, and it's time to call business leaders who are working in plans and goals in their organizations and ecosystems. I have the pleasure to bring to this conversation round André Clark, General Director of Siemens Energy Latin America. André, please. Also, Antônio Simões, CEO from Comgás, the largest pipe natural gas distributor in Brazil. And coming back to the stage, our CEO of Scania Latin America, to participate on this round of conversation, so important one. Please, let's sit down to start this conversation. Officially welcome to Sustainable Talks. I would like to thank you all for being here with us. Let's talk a little bit. It's interesting, we have in our roundtable, we have in common sectors that are part of the climate change problem. You are in a journey of decarbonization. You have an important role.
Afinal de
In the end of
contas,
the day,
transporte
transport
e
and
energia
energy
juntos
together,
somam mais de
some
terço
more
das
than
emissões de gases de efeito
of
estufa no
greenhouse
mundo.
effect
Mas
gas
o que eu
around the
acho
world.
muito interessante
But
aqui,
what
né,
is
Patrícia,
interesting,
que eles
Patricia,
sabem que
they
são parte
know
do
they are
problema,
part
mas
of the
decidiram
problem,
ser parte da
but decided
solução.
to be part of the
E é sobre isso que a
solution.
gente vai
And
falar
that's
agora.
what
Afinal
we
de
are
contas,
talking
Sustainable
about
Talks, a gente
right
quer
now.
trazer
Because in
soluções, né?
Sustainable
Falar
Talk,
de
we
problemas, mas
want to
trazer
bring
soluções
solutions.
para o
Talk about
nosso
them
futuro.
and bring
Então, a
solutions to
gente
our
começa a
future.
nossa
We
conversa
start a
com você, André.
conversation with you,
A
André.
gente quer
We
saber
want to know
qual a estratégia
what is
e
the
a visão de
strategy and
descarbonização
view
da
of
Siemens Energy aqui.
decarbonization of Siemens Energy here.
Mais nada, parabenizar
I would like
a
to
Scania,
congratulate Scania
pelo evento brilhante.
because of
Mais
this
do que
brilliant
isso, ter
event
duas
and
brilhantes,
having
Ju
these,
e Patrícia aqui
the two
organizando
brilliant ones,
e
Ju and
puxem
Patricia,
essa agenda.
organizing and
A preparação
everything
foi
here. The
brilhante.
preparation was brilliant.
Gente, acho que é muito importante dizer,
It's
né,
important to
a
say
humanidade,
humanity,
em tempos de discussão de teto
in times
no
of
Brasil,
discussing
o teto da
cap
natureza,
in
do
Brazil,
clima, do
of
carbono,
nature,
não
climate,
pode ser
carbon.
furado. E a gente chegou nesse limite.
We
Que
reached
nós
this
vimos,
limit, what we
e
saw,
o próprio
and
Rockström,
Professor
que
Rockström,
vocês apresentaram
you
aqui,
said, you talked to him
diz
before,
o seguinte,
he says,
que a pandemia
pandemic
da qual a gente tenta emergir
in which we are
está
in, we're trying to
profundamente
live, it's
relacionada
deeply
à
related
crise
to the
ambiental
environmental
e,
crisis
portanto,
and
totalmente ligada à
totally
crise
connected
climática.
to
A
climate
sociedade
crisis.
emerge
Society
do
emerges
Covid,
from
da crise de
COVID
Covid,
crisis
profundamente
deeply
atenta
aware
ao talvez ameaça
to the
de extinção.
threat
Foi o que
of
a gente
extinction.
encontrou
That's what we
recentemente.
faced recently.
A mesma
The
crise
same
nos
crisis
fragilizou politicamente,
made us
ainda
fragile
mais,
politically
polarizou e
speaking.
assim por diante. Foi isso que a gente
That's
viu na
what we
COP26.
saw in COP26.
Muito andou. A
We
sociedade
walked a lot, and the
absolutamente
society
descontente
is
com
really unhappy
o resultado.
with the
1,8
result.
não chega lá.
We do not
Mas
reach there,
será
but it will be
necessário e a
necessary,
pressão
and the
será
pressure will
tremenda.
be a huge one.
A Siemens Energy, Ju,
Siemens Energy
foi
was
criada
created
com propósito.
with one
Uma empresa
purpose.
de um ano de idade,
We
apesar de
have
ter
1-year-old,
150 de Brasil,
but we have 150
colocada
years
no
old here in
mercado,
Brazil. Turned 1 year, turned
de
to
Frankfurt como uma empresa
Frankfurt
independente, com o
market as
objetivo
an
de
independent
descarbonizar,
company with the goal of
e ajudar
decarbonize and
sociedades
help
que a gente
the
atua
societies where we are
a
working on to
descarbonizar os seus
decarbonize
sistemas
their
energéticos.
energy systems.
Uma semana depois
1
do IPO,
week
o
after the
primeiro
IPO,
anúncio
the
que
first
faz,
announcement we are making,
nós não servimos
we are
mais
not
carvão.
serving
Uma semana
coal
depois.
anymore. 1 week later,
O mundo
the
energético
energy world
roda quase
is running
40% a carvão.
almost
Isso, para nós,
40% with
é
coal.
uma transição
This is a
gigante.
giant
Mais
transition
do que
to
isso,
us.
os
More than that,
sistemas energéticos do planeta
energetic
estão transicionando
systems
nessa
of the
direção
country are going
numa
towards
velocidade
this
singular.
direction in a singular
O
speed.
mundo da energia
Energy world
era,
was,
e todos aqui
and everybody
sabem, era o mundo
knows,
da certeza.
was a
Uma
world
empresa
of certainty.
energética, se
An
vocês
energy
conversassem
company,
com um executivo
if you
ou
talk
executiva
to
do
an
mundo de óleo e gás,
executive from
era
oil
a
and gas,
imagem
they
da
were
certeza
the
sobre o
image
planeta.
of the certainty
No more.
about the country. No more.
A nossa própria
Our
empresa
company
se remodela
is
a cada 6
remodeling
meses.
itself each 6 months.
Conceito
A
fundamental
vital
está por
concept
trás
is
dessa
behind this reality.
É o conceito
The
econômico,
economic
novo conceito
concept, a
econômico que
new
nós
one,
estamos observando,
we are seeing
de
this,
energia a
of
custo marginal
energy
zero.
at marginal cost
Quando o
zero.
vento venta, quando o
When the
sol
wind is winning, the
brilha,
sun is shining,
o custo
the
para
cost
gerar
to
aquela
generate that
energia é
energy
zero.
is
Os
zero.
economics,
The economics
todo esse sistema
of this
muda
entire
radicalmente.
system is changing radically,
associado ao
associated to the
fato de que a
fact that
humanidade
humanity
tem
has
a
the
tecnologia
technology
para
to
fazer essa
make this
transição
energetic
energética.
transition.
O que não tem
What we
ainda
don't have yet
são os
is the
incentivos
incentives
para
to escalate
isso a uma
this
velocidade
to the
necessária.
necessary speed.
gente viu na
What
COP,
we've seen at
apesar da
COP,
votação
and
ali,
despite the vote
colocar
in
em
the air,
último
put in
estado
last
o
place
130 trilhões
the
de alocação de
130
responsabilidade
trillions
financeira,
of allocation of
isto
financial
representa
responsibility.
o
This
tamanho da
represents the
pressão da
size of the
sociedade
pressure of the society over us, the companies.
É isso que está acontecendo.
This is happening.
Uma empresa
A
criada
company
para
created
isso,
for this
trazendo
purpose,
pro
bringing
planeta,
to the country
pro
and to
Brasil,
Brazil
a ideia
the
do
idea
hidrogênio verde.
of green
O hidrogênio
hydrogen.
verde é um
This is
combustível
the
de
fuel
transição nessa
for
direção.
transition to
É o
towards this
combustível
direction. Is the
oriundo
fuel
da ideia
coming from the idea
custo marginal
of
zero.
marginal cost zero.
Creio que dentro em breve
I
vai ter
believe
vários
soon we'll have
caminhões da Scania
many Scania
sendo
trucks
testados
being
no
tested in
Brasil a
Brazil
hidrogênio verde.
with green hydrogen.
Exato.
That's
Interessante,
interesting,
André, que você
André.
traz aqui algumas
You're
coisas que
bringing
a
some
Elaine começou
things
falando,
Elaine
né?
talked
Primeiro com a
about.
Siemens Energy.
With
Você
Siemens
tem o
Energy,
business
you have the
focado,
business
já é
focused.
business strategy of
It is
sustentabilidade,
sustainability,
e vocês deram the great leap
and
com a
you
questão,
gave the great
né, do
layup
carvão.
with the
Obrigada
coal
pela
issue.
sua
Thank you for
explicação,
our
que a
explanation.
gente torce muito para
We
que
are really
aqui
excited
nós somos
that
todos
we
na
are waiting
Scania
that
realistas
we are
otimistas, Ariano
realistic,
Suassuna. Não é
optimistic,
isso, Juliana?
like Ariano
Então,
Suassuna
obrigada
says.
por ter explicado
Thank
essa
you for
rota da Siemens
explaining us
Energy.
the
E
path of
passando
Siemens
também para
Energy.
falar de rota,
And talking
Christopher,
about
eu
this
vou
path,
passar a bola para você.
Christopher,
Qual o
now
ponto
it's
de
on
partida
you.
da
What's the
Scania, já
starting
que
point
o André tá
at
prometendo
Scania?
aqui hidrogênio
André
verde,
said
como é
about
que a
green
gente pensou a
hydrogen.
nossa
How did
descarbonização?
we
Como é que a gente
think
vai seguir
about
nesse
our
caminho?
decarbonization? How are we following this path? In first place, I'm really happy with Siemens' initiative of
a sua
moving their future towards looking renewable green solutions energy. We had this perception in view in 2016 when we were one of the first to adhere to the Paris Climate Agreement. And we understood at that time that, as it was previously said, we were part of the problem, but we had the obligation to be part of the solution. So, from holding this, adopting this as our new purpose of decarbonizing a sector which was seen as traditional and hard to beat in the decarbonization point of view, we understood that we knew what was the what, and we started to build the how we were going to do this. And soon we started to define some internal goals, but the great leverage, as Carlos said previously, was holding science-based initiatives, where we decided to challenge our emissions, scope 1 or 2, in 50% from 2015 to 2025. Probably something which was impossible to imagine. It was not reachable, but we will reach before the final period. It shows that with focus, determination, active decision-making, everything is possible, isn't it, Guilherme? Another thing where we advanced on this view of changing a purpose integrated in the business plan with concrete goals was determining a goal for Scope 3. Why Scope 3? These are products and services I have delivered. This is something that is circulating in the market, but we know this corresponds to 96% of emissions. It's a lot. We have to act there somehow. Some years ago, and always in a comprising way, we are working in three basic pillars. First, energetic efficiency, the products we are delivering now, the ones in field, in pure engineering over correct specifications for each application and individual operation. It's also a great contribution to the environment, transporting more with less. And this is a big contribution without changing the energetic grid. The second is using the founder gold, as we said, data lakes, data warehouse, and use the information to get the optimization of the entire activities of transportation and logistics based on connectivity. Currently, Scania, since 2012, have all their means connected. The data previously went to a mainframe, now it's going to the cloud, and it brings up an infinity of possibilities strategies of optimizing the activities. This combination of individual operation optimized and removing the possible interferences, optimizing flows, decreasing loading and unloading times, this brings a big contribution. An additional and definitive step is making the energetic transition from fossil grid to renewable and or electrification. We understand we'll have multiple technologies in the future. Maybe I can talk about this later. Also, during Sustainable Talks last year, we talked about aquatic transportation, but we'll come back to this point. And now, about what André said, about the innovation, reinvention, the new purpose, the technologies Christopher said about, which are helping to diminish, as we say. Antonio, innovation, technology, how Comgás is reinventing itself to help the transition with the transformation. Thank you, Patricia, for this question. But I would also like to thank. I feel so glad to be in this such a strong table for this theme in this moment where we are. I would like to say to you and Juliana, who said the disclaimer at the beginning of the talk, you were not professionals, but it's not true. Everybody's seeing that. Oh, who have good friends. I was so inspired in the beginning of our conversation with Elaine that I will try to make a parallel with the model she brought to us and answer you in the end about the leap, the third step on this model. I think in case of Comgás, as Siemens is a company 150 years here in the state of São Paulo, but it's renewing itself each year. This is a landmark in the group. When I look to the foundation, let's start with this. We have a growing work of understanding where we are. I'm talking about the group, but specifically Comgás. An example, we'll start doing the counting of our emissions some years ago. Early in this year, we have a detailed exercise where we counted on Scania, counted materiality grid to define the areas of biggest impact where we want to put our efforts. And we are defining three big flags to act on this ecosystem, let's say, of sustainability, with more focus to define our own goals. The flags are valuing people and society, offering more energy with less emissions, and developing infrastructure of the country. In case of Comgás, I'm talking about the restrained area of the concession here in São Paulo. Then we start to talk about ambitious goals, and the other part is the core. I think currently we can see at Comgás a series of things which are embedded inside our business. An example, safety. There's no sustainability without a safe operation. We are working with dangerous products. The Seek for Zero Accident. We have awards for 3 years in the International Association of Gas because of our indexes. Another example, and talking a little bit with our team, fugitive emissions, gas in its operation, some leakage of emissions. And we didn't wait for COP26 handle methane. Since 2018, we had an entire renovation of our grid, reducing almost 90% the emissions. It's something we are proud of, putting us as the first or second in the world in this requirement of methane emissions and fugitive emissions. There are a lot of things inside of operation we are dealing with, themes like diversity. I'm proud to say at Comgás we have 38% of women in leadership functions. We worked along this year to another part of diversity to reach our company. The company has an operation execution areas, very strong one. They were were almost all male, and we had a partnership with FATEC School and Secretariat of Development of the State of São Paulo. We have a class of 50 women. An important part of our operation with a lot of males in there. We hired the women, put the other ones in the market through our partners. That's the core. And when I go to the LEAP, I reach your question, original question, but I was really impacted the way it was divided. I would like to talk about some things that I think that could give us this LEAP, and also use the presence of Andrés and Chris, because I think some of them are related to the companies.
First, we have an energy scenario, and we have a technology and a need for energy very specific for São Paulo. So the cogeneration, the distributed generation, combined with solar and wind energy, we had an initiative of the two companies at some time before that. The time is now. This is something that changes very rapidly, and we talked about stability. The ASG that starts with steps that viabilize other steps, not just this ambition that is very distant. So this is something that speaks to our companies. We talked about methane. Inside our group, we have many initiatives, and Comgás has already positioned itself as one of its goals to determine that biomethane is going to be part of our supply chain, supply matrix. So we're going to work so this can be viable, so this can grow. So we are lucky that we live in a very rich state. As Christopher likes to say, we have other friends that always bring this topic. We have a lot of renewable sources here, and this is we're going to make it viable, and this is going to escalate in a viable way. And in the end, I think this connects to what Christopher said. Something that only Elaine has said is we have many roads, essentially roads. So we have to start somewhere. We have to work in partnership with Scania to make this step viable, to substitute diesel by natural gas in their truck. And this is something that can be used for methane, and we have to start with hydrogen. This is an innovation project that we're going to start next year. We're going to start to test percentiles of hydrogen in the grid. This is something that is more advanced in Europe, but we're going to start here. So our infrastructure, the offer and supply, this has to walk hand to hand, because otherwise this cannot happen. So we have participated in other transitions. I say that Comgás in the last decades, we left, for example, from oil, and this we changed from that, and this had an impact. And transportation will bring an impact also, a big impact. Also for cargo transportation, for urban transportation, for articulated buses. And I think that this is something that has to be put into action now. I think that I have answered your question longer than you wanted, no problem. But I think that you all have passed in Elaine's class, that you all have paid attention. This has made me very happy. People, please ask questions. You can send them in the chat. Someone that is present here also in the WhatsApp. I would like to talk to you again, André. You talked about one of the leverages that was innovation, the repositioning of Siemens to work for this decarbonization. But there is another leverage that you talk more, and it's part of your agenda, and you participate in it actively, which is the public policy. It's very important, and we have to have this as our partner. This look that the government has to work with us. So how are you following this after COP? This is very recent, but how are you looking at this in 20, 30 years? How are you looking at this dialogue? Well, before, we are partners in this history. It's revolutionary. It's also revolutionary. So I think it's important for us to do this together. The point here, Patricia, is that every time a company distances itself from the public interest, it loses itself. In the opposite, it's also true. When you get closer to the public interest, you allow yourself to say something about the public policies of a country. We believed in this deeply because our business, energy, is deeply connected to the sovereign of each country where we operate. Energy is one of the fundamental pillars of public policies. In Brazil, Patricia, this had shown clearly in COP26. 2 pavilions, guys. One pavilion for civil society and another pavilion. This is very important. Showing the size, the dimension that the Brazilian society gives to this theme. We believe that in Brazil, we believe in the Brazil that has held Rio 92. We believe in a Brazil that is a protagonist of the climate change, not for the world to see, but because it's fundamental to us. The first loser, the deforestation in Amazon, that is out of control is the Brazilian society. Why? Because our economy lives from water, needs water. We generate 80% of our energy from hydroelectric energy. The success of our agriculture is due to the season of the rainy season, controlled by many biomes like Cerrado and many others. So the success of ethanol, it's based on water. Brazil has climate scientists that are fantastic and that have made simulations on what happens if we continue to deforestate in this speed. Brazil loses this benefit, this gift, and this capacity to realize if this happens. The opposite is also true. For Brazil, there is a singular opportunity, a unique opportunity for industry in 2020, for the 21st century. It is green and revolutionary in all aspects. We can't lose this opportunity. That is why the public policy is so important, because they unite everyone. Now you gave me the word, because if you talk about green economy, I'm going to talk about something else. We have a question from the public. I'm going to do this question for Christopher and Anthony. How are you going to work to make the biomethane to be viable? Are you working with the extraction and the structure of Comgás? Now, we talked about Brazil, we talked about biomethane, we talked about green economy, we talked about transition. So, now you have to talk about biomethane. Antonio and Christopher, how is the future of biomethane? Is it possible or not? Is this infrastructure that talks to the governments, how are we going to do that? Who wants to start? By alphabetical order. Oh, you're very nice. If you allow me, I'm going to ask Antonio to explain what is biomethane, because a lot of people make mistakes. What is biomethane after all? So then you answer us, please. Talking to something that, getting something that was related to a talk that I mentioned before, we talked about renewable gas. And we have to think about how we're going to say this. Biomethane is essentially, you have three main sources. I'm going to try to be fast and didactic. So, generates gas that you can capture in some way and treat this gas for generation of energy or for purification, and then it changes to biomethane. Other sources are, when we talked about pre-salt, is to talk about the sugar electric sector. Some issues transform, some matters transform into gas, and they are subproducts of the process, of the industrial process, that can be also captured and treated and purified to be used. And also residues. We call them manures, related to pig creation, essentially pig raising, I'm sorry. This is something that we use here in Comgás, is related to Comgás. So the biggest source is into the sugar electric energy, and we have a project in our greatest matrix in the region of Guaíra. It's outside of the concession of Comgás Energy, and I have a series of projects that were recently released. Now, this is something that is not a dilemma. This is something that is being researched for quite a while now. It's a reality. So we're not talking about a technology that is going to be available in 5-10 years. We're talking about something that is already here. The plant is already working. We have other plants that are viable already. And how are we going to escalate this? And then Comgás has a fundamental role, because part of what I said in my question is to provide first the infrastructure, to open the space in the infrastructure so the product can be more available, to be logistically available, because it can be compressed, it can be turned into liquid, but there are a series of ways. But in Comgás, in the concession area, we have 20,000 kilometers of pipeline, of gas pipelines. So this product can occupy this pipeline, this network. So our role is that to connect the offer and supply of this product with big companies. The big companies are seeking for that. And we see a movement in other countries that the clients seek for renewable energy. So people are demanding, the clients are demanding. Our part is logistic and distribution. And I think this is also related to Scania, to create the infrastructure of corridors, so we can have a transport solution for cargo. So the corridor starts blue with natural gas, but they open space for green corridors with the methane of offer. And in the future, the hydrogen, maybe this could be an alternative. So the importance thing is that our infrastructure is growing, and we're making these projects viable in scale. Christopher? Well, after this class, yes, so if you are following us on YouTube, you can send us here through our chat. How can you call biomethane? Christopher, I'm sorry, you can continue. I would like to propose a different look. Not talking about biomethane or ethanol or electrification. We can think about something different. All the ecosystem, it will depend on its for this operation, it will depend on energy. So if you have an end-to-end vision, kilowatts per hour, or kilojoules produced, we have to see the whole scope. We have to see which one is going to do the mitigation of carbon and propose the best equation, economically and financial equation. With this in mind, it's less trendy And we have to do more. We have to drive the change. And we have to think about each country, each solutions for each country. The solutions that are going to be used in other countries, in Europe, in China, and also other places that are below the equator line. So one of the reasons I am so enthusiastic about biomethane is that first, the transportation, the logistic, was 100% fossil fuel. To do this transformation is not easy. We have been doing this for 100 years. This has happened for 100 years very slowly. So this is important to do this gradual change in terms of economy and finance. But the biomethane has a little bit of a magic solution to transform the residues that are connected from the industry, and we change the liability to a green asset. So I am very enthusiastic about that. With this in mind, and also, biomethane is the same substance as the natural gas. Natural gas was generated hundreds of years ago, and this one we can produce from the residues that we produce right now. At the end of the journey, we'll have electrification probably, but the source of that kilowatt per hour that's going to be used in the car or in a plane, it's going to be more adherent to the particularities of each country. And then the public policies are going to take place in a way that the companies have understood that we don't have only shareholders. We have to reach all stakeholders. In a democracy, the government has to listen to society in all the stakeholders. They are the same ones that elect the governance and that think about the public policies. They are the same ones that make the companies to resist. We are 130 years old, when Comgás is also a centenary company. So we have very important discussions in the future. We are reaching the end of this nice conversation. We have so many questions, but we'll not make all of them right now because we are ending. But the theme of the panel today is partnership. We have 3 CEOs, leaderships, with the pressure from stakeholders, shareholders. The question I have is, for the 3 of you, talk a little bit about the authenticity of being a partner. How can we work cross-industry, cross-sector, cross-company together? In fact, we know we have other issues, but how do we make this grow in terms of partnership? André, what's your view on the possibility of partnership for scale, for example? Partnership or alliance of creation of an ecosystem towards this is the only way out. There's no possibility of doing the size of the transformation we need if we're not absolutely together. It starts with things like this. I'm here with Christopher and you since 2016. Let's do this, let's do that. During the meeting, I was talking to Antonio. We have a project almost for 10 years with you about São Paulo Power Ring. São Paulo will be about gas, many kinds of, and solar system, solar grids. What's the point? Bringing us together is trust. That's the point. This
when together it provides a big set of things about this fertile soil. We create this way the goals, the actions, common projects. There's no possibility of doing anything if we're not doing this together, complementarily, inserted into the reality of our country, and together around ideals you are brilliantly showing here. These signs join us around concrete projects, and it was about to inspire you. Thanks for that. Christopher, partners, how do we do that? We know we cannot promote the transformation alone. The definition of stakeholder is that, and we have to think on the end-to-end. We don't have the solution of the entire chain, change to change. The complementarity of the actions will make feasible the solutions so we can do this transformation. In mutual trust point of view, it's built not only here, but also in an alliance with many other companies that will speed up and escalate this transformation. Very good. I hope to be present to see everything happen. And Antonio, we are partners. What can you say about partnerships to change the ecosystem? To complement on them, I agree with everything Andre and Christopher said, but I bring again Elaine to enlighten this end of conversation. Exponential problems are not solved with incremental solutions. Isn't that a good sentence? And partnerships talk about this. We are in the age of collaboration. We have competitors, of course, but it's not the case here. And even competitors are joining together to discuss things we are discussing here. And I'm really happy to be here today with partners, believing in the partnerships, in the way of escalating this so we can, step by step, follow this path for a better world. Ju, before closing, we have a couple minutes. We had a suggestion about biomethane. Is there anything? Yes, Thiago Melo said it could be called green gas. But let's try to find the Brazilian name. If anyone have an idea, you can bring in the chat and we can say during the transmission, our broadcasting. The time is up, but I will ask you to wait a little bit with us while we close, okay? That's it, guys. We started the event today, for sure, knowing we'll do sustainable talks to talk about what we've done to overcome the obstacles and change the course of history. Inertia is the only scenario we cannot consider. In this seek by decarbonization, the key word is partnership. We need to look for the ones that are sharing our will, our action, our purpose of moving us towards a sustainable world. Remembering partnership, the most vital one we have with our country is with our planet. We need to make it more sustainable. The role of Scania is building bridges, alliance, coalitions, promoting dialogues among industries, sectors, companies, and society. In the end, we need to address the theme of climate change with concern, but with hope, because hope makes our fear into action. And there's no solution without action to follow this path. Juliana? Yes, Patricia, that's the moment to close our first day of sustainable talks. It was really fast. I don't know for you, it was really accelerated for all of us. We thank you all that were with us online. The ones that were present here, we know the challenge of leaving home, traffic, and being here with us, but the energy was vital for being an amazing event. And we need to remember our event is following all along the week. Tomorrow, please write in your agenda, 10 a.m. Brazilian time. We'll have people from many countries, but Brazilian time. We'll talk to our guests on the challenges of digitalization to speed up sustainability. We'll have people from Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, and Sweden.